Next is sound editors. Once you've made recordings, you might need to edit them. Various programs that enable you to do so are available. Sound editors, you can use the Audacity to make and edit recordings on your computer. Its function includes changing the volume, speed, and or tempo of sound files, cutting out silences and background noise, and adding fade-ins and fade-outs and multi-track recording. Next is the electronic translators are available as handheld units or as software. Handheld ones are portable, easy and quick to search, and often provide other functions such as text-to-speech, voice recognition, speech synthesis, organizers, and address books. Now let us talk about the current trends and issues in materials development. So what should drive materials? The needs and wants of the learners should drive the materials, but teachers have needs and wants to be satisfied too, according to Mashua 2011. And so to administrators with their concerns for standardization and conformity with. Now let us talk about the issues in materials development. First is, do learners need course book? Course books benefits administrators and teachers without catering for the needs and wants of the learners. In 80s, Allwright 1981 put forward arguments against ways in which textbooks deliver materials, responded with a defense of course book. Since then, there has been continual debate about whether learners need from course book or not. Opponents have argued that the course book benefits administrators and teachers without catering for the needs and wants of the learners. Do learners need published materials at all? In recent years, there has been a move away from using unpublished materials in institutions throughout developing their own locally relevant materials. Proposing the DOME-ELT movement, which advocates learner-centered materials approach, and yet surveys by British Council 2008 and Tomlinson 2010 show that most teachers continue to use commercially published materials, even though many do so with compulsion or reluctance. Should materials be learning or acquisition focused? Most published materials focus on conscious learning of language points, but many researchers argue that learners should be provided with many more opportunities to acquire language informally from exposure to language in use. Next, should materials cater for learner expectation or to try to change them? Traditionally, it has been argued that it is important to provide learners with what they expect or else risk rejection of materials. Recently, two researchers, Tomlinson 2005, have pointed out that it is the teacher rather than the learners who are resistant to change, and that learners often welcome innovative approaches which have the potential to engage them. Should materials be driven by syllabus needs, learners' needs, or market needs? Most published materials are inevitably driven by perceived market needs, but many large institutions are beginning to publish their own materials because of the mismatch between the courses available and their local institution needs. And many researchers are arguing that learners are suffering because courses are designed primarily to appeal to the administrators and teachers who are responsible for buying them. Next is, should published materials be censored? It is common practice for publishers to censor materials to make sure that they do not give offense or cause embarrassment. Many authors have complained about the unengaging blandness of the materials which result from what they see as excessive caution. Next, should materials be driven by theory or practice? Reviews of ELT course books reveal that course book writers are much more influenced by what is conventional practice than by theories of language practice or even by classroom research. In some ways, this is a vicious circle as publishers continue to produce courses with face validity which they know will sell. Should materials aim for language development only or should also aim to personal and educational development? Many language teachers argue that it is their job to help the learners acquire language and that they are not responsible for their educational development. Others argue that if language learners are situated in an educational establishment, then their teachers' main responsibility is to help them to develop. And others argue that not only are personal and educational development main objectives of any language course, but that the achievement of these objectives, there is nothing much new going on in materials development that in the area of commercially produced materials. There is even sorts of principles going back. This is justified by publishers by reference to their confidential research into what learners and teachers want. The return to the centrality of grammar highlighted by Tomlinson 2001. What are the current trends in materials development? The positive trends. There are some materials requiring investment by the learners in order for them to make discoveries for themselves from analysis of samples of language in use. There are more materials making use of corpus data reflecting actual language use. And then there are more extensive reader series being produced with fewer linguistic constraints and more provocative content. Another positive trends. There has been very noticeable and welcome increase in attempts to personalize the learning process by getting learners to relate topics and text to their own lives, views, and feelings. There is an increase in attempts to gain the effective engagement of learners. Also, there is an increasing use of internet as a source of current, relevant, and appealing text. Lastly, there is evidence of a movement away from spoken practice of written grammar and towards experience of spoken grammar use. Now let us talk about the negative trends. There is an even more pronounced return to the central place in grammar in the language curriculum. Second, there is still a far greater prominence given in course books to listening and speaking than to reading and writing, according to Tomlinson and Mashura. There is an assumption that most learners have short attention spans, can only cope with very short reading and writing text, and will only engage in activities for a short time. There seems to be an assumption that learners do not want and would not gain from intellectually demanding activities while engaging in language learning. Next, there is a neglect or sometimes an abuse of literature in course books despite its potential as a source of stimulating and engaging text and despite the many claims of methodologists for potential value and appeal to of literature. Next, there is a continuing predominance of analytical activities and a neglect of activities which could cater for learners with other preferred learning styles. Lastly, there is an absence of controversial issues to stimulate thought, to provide opportunities for exchange of views, and to make topic content meaningful. So those are the current trends and issues in materials development. So what is the importance of materials development? Materials development is very important in English foreign or second language because it effectively bridges the gap between the course topic, the teacher, and the student.